Thank you to everyone who's joining us this afternoon to hear the presentation, as well as those who are going to be providing testimony, whether that's verbal testimony or written testimony. This, of course, is a public hearing of the New York City Water Board on wholesale water rates to take effect beginning July 1st of 2021. During the COVID-19 pandemic, we've been holding the board's events in a virtual conference call format to facilitate access in light of the pandemic. And we would ask that everyone place their phone on mute to limit the background noise and make sure that people who are giving presentations can be heard clearly. I have placed several documents into the official record, including a notice that appoints me as the hearing officer, verified copies of the public notices that were placed in the proper newspapers, a copy of the rate consultant's report on the regulated wholesale rate, and copies of the written testimony received by the board so far. The rate consultant's report is available on the board's website, as is a copy of the presentation that you're going to be hearing today. This meeting is being recorded, and once prepared, an audio recording and transcript of the meeting will be made available on the board's website, which is nyc.gov/nycwaterboard. For members of the public who are having difficulty hearing, there is a real-time text captioning feature available to follow up with the meeting. You need to copy and paste a URL linking to the streamtext.net website. That URL is long, so I'm not going to read it, but you can access it for copy and paste by visiting the Water Board homepage now while we're getting sorted here at the beginning, and clicking the meeting materials link again under the announcements section. So that's on the Water Board webpage, clicking the meeting materials link under the announcements section. You will also find the URL provided on the public announcement posted on the board's website. The agenda for today includes two sections. So first, the Department of Environmental Protection is going to make a presentation, and then members of the public will have an opportunity to make a statement and give their testimony. To get it started, I'm going to hand it over to Joseph Murin. Executive Director Murin, are you ready?
Yes, thank you, Adam.
All right.
Before I start, I would like to recognize that three of our board members, Adam Freed, Jonathan Golden, and Arlene Shaw, are on the call, and I would offer them the opportunity, if they wish to make a statement before we start the presentation.
Good morning, Joe. This is Evelyn. I'm also here.
Okay, Evelyn Fernandez-Ketchum. Thank you, Evelyn.
Thank you. Okay.
This is Adam Freed. I guess I'll just channel our chair who's not here, and just to thank any members of the public who are joining us today to provide testimony, and remind folks that the rate proposal that was set forth is just that by DEP staff. It is a proposal, and we come to this with a very open mind and actively and attentively listen to the testimony and pour through anything that's given to us in writing as we consider the proposal before us, and consider that fully in any final decision we take at the rate adoption that will come later this month. So just want to thank everyone for participating in what we view as a really critical and important part of this process.
Great. Thank you, Adam. Any other board members wish to add anything? Hearing nothing, I'll start the presentation. So I'm on the PowerPoint that, as Omar noted, is on the website, and I'm starting on slide 1, which is the purpose of today's presentation. Today's public presentation addresses proposed water rates to be charged effective July 1st, 2021 for water sold by the City of New York to communities and water districts located in the counties of Westchester, Putnam, Orange, and Ulster. A public hearing is conducted by the New York City Department of Environmental Protection and the New York City Water Board in any year in which there is a proposal to raise water rates. The general public has an opportunity to speak today following DEP's presentation. Pre-registered speakers will speak first, then the hearing will be opened up to the public. All members of the public with comments, questions, or concerns should feel free to present testimony or to send questions to the Water Board at 718-595-3591 or nycwaterboard@dep.nyc.gov before 4 p.m. on June 11th. Moving to slide 2, headed DEP strives to be a good wholesale water supply partner. DEP acts as a backstop for communities facing water quality or water contamination issues and makes available the city's water system as an alternative source of water supply to communities experiencing water safety issues. DEP pays more than $165 million per year on water system real property located outside of the city. The agency is often among the largest taxpayers in the communities where water system assets are located. Due to its size and relationship with the City of New York, the city's water system can issue debt for capital construction purposes on market competitive terms, providing an efficient way to finance capital construction for the benefit of all ratepayers. The Water Board retained a consultant at its expense for a multi-year engagement to provide detailed suggestions to wholesale water customers on techniques for reducing water consumption and identifying lost revenue. I'd also note that we have at this time $20 million investment in a new Microsoft Dynamics UMix billing system launching before the end of 2021, including new billing system that will work for the wholesale customers as well. Moving on to slide 3, update on DEP's operations in the last year. Water supply reliability and water quality north of the city were maintained to high standards during the COVID-19 pandemic. DEP is following CDC guidelines regarding workplace safety protocols. After reaching a peak of 80% of office employees in remote work format, the DEP workforce began returning to work sites the week of May 3rd. On a typical day at current rate, 70% of DEP's personnel are on site. Some pandemic measures remain in place, including restrictions and deferrals of certain administrative actions, as well as new digital business processes introduced to the agency during the pandemic. Pandemic-related incremental costs to the water supply system have been modest to date, although the outlook may include higher inflation. Moving on to slide number 4, DEP is a large construction manager with significant water supply projects. On this slide, you'll see a chart showing the agency's fiscal year 2022 through fiscal year 2031 capital budget, totaling $20.4 billion. Of that, the bulk of those funds are related to wastewater capital programs, such as the wastewater treatment plants in the city and sewer and replacement extensions in the city as well. There is a significant portion, approximately a third of that also goes to water capital programs, many of those being upstate assets. Approximately 1/6 of the sale proceeds from issuing bonds is used for water supply projects north of the city. Major initiatives underway include significant ongoing progress on the Delaware Aqueduct bypass work, with the final stage scheduled for completion in 2022 to 2023. Ongoing investments in the watershed under the filtration avoidance determination across multiple investment channels, and hiring and training of DEP police and watershed security personnel. Moving on to slide 5, I'm going to turn this over to Water Board Treasurer Omar Nabi.
Hello, everyone. So slide 5 and slide 4, I think, work as a theme together. The idea is to do something I think we've done in the past, but haven't done as much in recent years. Perhaps we have met as frequently in recent years. But just to kind of try and explain the role of kind of our upstate customers, our north of the city customers, and wholesale water supply in the context of the overall system. We do it not to try and make the wholesale sort of operation seem small, but we do it just to kind of emphasize the sort of scale and the heft of kind of what DEP does. I think some of that is sometimes invisible north of the city, and I think it's just worth emphasizing just to kind of show kind of the engineering and technical skill, the customer service skill, kind of all the different functions we have, which work together to provide. I would argue a sort of level of technical engineering talent, even on water supply, that you wouldn't see in a sort of pure play on water supply only utility or a smaller organization. It's intangible and hard to measure, but we're really trying to make that point on slides 4 and 5, and that's why we're showing both the capital in its entirety and the revenues and water as a % of the total. The trend line on slide 5 is sort of uninteresting. Obviously, it's just what water has been about about the 9 to 10% level of total system supply for years. The revenues bounce around the 2% plus or minus a few points level. It's financially in water terms, just to repeat myself, it is a relatively modest portion of the total, but it is very important. I think it works both ways in terms of we are able to have a strong quality water supply source outside the city in partnership with the communities where our assets are located. And those communities receive the benefit of the financial support of DEP and these sort of engineering and technical skills on a scale that small utilities often don't have. So that's really what we're trying to say on slides 4 and 5. Slide 6 is data you've seen before in prior presentations. We tried to just visually make it a little interesting here, a little different. What it shows on the sort of sideways axis is the change in total water consumption charged at the regulated rate year over year, and then on the up and down axis, the y-axis, how much we increased rates in the year. And it's interesting. I think the main point I would sort of draw attention to, this is what the slide is titled, is there were some reductions in consumption in FY 18 and 19. In the case of FY 19, substantial reduction in consumption. We're seeing that not reverse a little bit because total consumption is still lower. We're seeing kind of the direction of change back toward more a level of increase in consumption in FY 20 and 21 to date. It's interesting because the sort of down years were prior to the pandemic, and the increasing years are during the pandemic, which is a little bit a different direction than what you would kind of guess intuitively, but it is what we're seeing. And that's really just in terms of sort of additional commentary on this. I would say that, the conservation is still, we'd like to see more in terms of water efficiencies and water reduction. While there have been gains in terms of water efficiency if you compare today to 5 years ago, and that is true on both the regulated and excess rate. There's more we'd like to do, and that was, of course, part of the impetus of why we hired the rate consultant, or the rate advisor alluded to earlier at the board's expense to work on just this issue with the communities. But that's really what the slide is talking about on slide 6. Joe, I'll give it back to you for slide 7.
Thank you, Omar. So slide 7, headed background on water rate charged north of the city. There are 2 rates. The regulated rate, sometimes referred to as the entitlement rate. The regulated rate is the rate chargeable on quantities of water sold to a community up to the total amount of water equal to the community's population multiplied by the rate of per capita water consumption in New York City, using decennial federal census data as the population base. The excess rate, which is the rate applicable to quantities of water not eligible for sale at the regular rate. Since population per capita comes in are both variables, the threshold shifts over time and are different from customer to customer. That being said, I'm going to go now to slide 8, which is the regular rate has not changed in 4 of the 5 last years. So this is where we are, proposing a rate increase for fiscal year 2022, starting July 1st of this year, of 8.82%. I want to draw attention to, the fact that over the past 5 years, there has only been one increase to the upstate rate. That was 9.2% in 2020. All those other years, the upstate rate was held steady, much of that due to being linked as well with how we're, modulating rates within the city. So there's been, as noted on the slide, the average increase over those years was 1.78%. So there is some degree of catch-up that we are doing, with this rate increase for this year. Moving on to slide 9, proposed rate to take effect July 1st, 2021. DEP is recommending to the Water Board an increase to the regular rate of 8.82%, equating to a rate per million gallons of $2,054.63. An increase of 8.82% to the regulated rate will result in an increase of just under $1 per month to the water bill of households using 70,000 gallons of water per year. So that's even less than what we will be seeing for in-city rate increases. Again, I will note that that is the wholesale rate. That doesn't take into consideration what rate may be additionally charged by the provider of the water in those communities, whether it's a private or municipal water supplier. DEP is also recommending an increase to the excess rate of 2.76%, in line with the proposed in-city rate increase, equating to a rate per million gallons of $5,355.07. Also of note, beginning in 2019, prior to the start of the pandemic, we began to see a limited number of wholesale customers come delinquent on their water bills. Customers facing a delinquency should reach out to DEP or the board so we can understand the issues and work through any challenges. In the short term, the cost of delinquencies is absorbed by customers who are current on their bills. Moving on to slide 10, I'm going to turn this back over to Omar to go through this.
So this is really a very really kind of a summary of a single table in the longer report by our rate consultant Amawalk, which is on the board's website, as Adam mentioned. But this is really, it shows, I don't know there's a lot to say about it, it shows the major line items that flow into the calculation of the proposed regulated rate for the coming year. I think the one thing I would draw attention to is the phase in the very bottom line above the black line across the middle. The phase-in of prior year expenses previously undercharged. This is an issue with we have a sort of, I guess I'd say, a basket of costs we've yet to recover through revenues from prior year rate calculations. These are kind of held in abeyance, to use the term, and smoothed in under this phase-in methodology to kind of adhere to the practice of avoiding rate shock. And that we've been doing that for a number of years, and that's consistent with, I think, past rate reports and a concept all the industry folks on the phone will be familiar with. There's some additional catch-up, I would say, since we've gone for 4 of the 5 years without a rate increase. So the basket is starting to look like something you might want to. It's starting to. We need to do some catching up there, I think, is kind of the message. In terms of the line item, how it works mathematically, it's no different than the past, but it is just the one thing on this page I'd want to draw your attention to. Joe, I'll give it back to you for page 11.
Thank you, Omar. So I will note that the water board will be meeting, as Member Freed pointed out. This is not yet decided. The board will make a determination based on the input they get from this hearing and the other hearings we've been having. The board meeting is scheduled for Monday, June 14th. The location will be, again, a virtual, meeting. The phone number will be 347-921-5612 with an access code of 323-706-678. It is at 9 a.m. on the 14th. And again, this information is all available on the water board's website. That being said, I'll turn the proceedings back over to Hearing Officer Bosch.
Thank you. So now I'm going to begin the public testimony portion of the hearing. I have one pre-registered speaker signed up who I will call on first, and then after that I'll make the hearing available to anyone else who would like to speak. So the one person who is signed up to speak in advance is Joel Dichter from Dichter Law. Joel, are you there?
I am here. Thank you very much. Can you hear me okay?
We can.
Because I have on speakerphones. If you can't hear me, let me know and I'll pick up the handset.
You sound good. Go ahead.
Great. Thank you. I'd like to thank the Water Board for this opportunity. My name is Joel Dichter. I'm with Dichter Law, and I have the privilege of representing a number of upstate municipalities that are wholesale customers of the New York City Water Board, and thus we appear before you today with regard to the rates charged to customers north of New York City. While we thank you for the opportunity today, we believe an evidentiary proceeding will provide the Water Board with a more complete record upon which to render an informed decision. The upstate municipalities are dependent upon the city for their supply of water and are entitled to receive a supply of water from the New York City reservoir system pursuant to law and also the terms of the permit issued by DEC for the reservoir system, which of course is built upon the lands and wetlands of the upstate community. Specifically, I'm appearing today on behalf of the village of Scarsdale, the cities of Yonkers, White Plains, the town of Greenburgh, Suez Water Westchester, which serves a number of municipalities up in southern Westchester County, as well as the Westchester Joint Waterworks, which is composed of portions of Harrison and Mamaroneck and New Rochelle. Over the years, the upstate communities have experienced tremendous increases in the rates charged by the Water Board for the water provided on a wholesale basis. The Upstate Rate Report for fiscal year 2022, prepared by Amawak Group, proposes an increase in entitlement rate for the first time in excess of $2,000 to $2,057.98 per million gallons. The proposal for fiscal year 22, on the heels of a pandemic, represents a 9% increase above the current rate, which of course these communities will have to pass on to their already troubled businesses and residents as a result of the impact of the shutdown from the COVID pandemic that they're still trying to bring their way back from. However, there really is in fact no cost support for any increase at this time. The city's own report prepared by Amawak concludes that the current rate of $1,888 exceeds the calculated rate for fiscal year 22 of $1,879 based upon the budgeted costs of operation. Therefore, no rate increases in the entitlement rate is justified based upon the cost of ongoing operations to supply water to upstate communities. As for the so-called excess rate set by the Water Board, unlike the entitlement rate that is established by the Water Board using a cost study, the excess rate is simply set equal to the in-city retail rate, even though the upstate customers use no portion of the city's in-city distribution system, lost water, and other costs of operating the system within New York City. This year, the proposed excess rate is $5,355 per million gallons, a 2.8% hike. However, there is no additional cost to the city from providing excess water in addition to entitlement water. In fact, all the costs of operating the system are recovered through the entitlement rate. The excess rate at 2.6 times the entitlement rate has no basis or support, and no rationale has been given for doing so. Nor can it be justified as having needed an increased rate on the basis of supply and demand. There's been a prolonged period of declining demand both in the city and upstate. Consequently, there are sufficient supplies to meet the needs of the city and upstate communities for a foreseeable future. That is not to say that upstate communities are in any way looking to waste water. They, of course, want to keep their costs down, have been investing in ways in water conservation, notifying its customers of water conservation, and, of course, all have in place drought requirements in case that is ever needed. The excess rate should not become a mechanism just for the city to raise surplus funds at the expense of their fellow New York State residents and businesses, especially at this time. Given that all the costs of serving upstate customers north of the city are recovered by the Water Board through the entitlement rate, it is time for the excess rate to simply be eliminated and water provided to upstate communities from the reservoirs built upon their lands and watersheds provided at the entitlement rate. We have attempted over the years, and board members may be aware, we have pending before DC numerous proceedings related to a review of this rate set at the city retail rate. We've tried to negotiate with the Water Board to date and have been unable to reach an agreement. We still hope to do so, but based on the trend lines as we see and decreasing demand and plentiful supply, there really is no more need for this entitlement rate for the excess rate to be any more than the entitlement rate. I don't know if I have more time. I'll continue or I'll stop here. Let me know. Shall I continue?
Yeah, continue.
Okay, so I was told I only had 5 minutes, so I just want to make sure. We agree that a cost-based entitlement rate is appropriate and required. As noted above, the city's own rate report finds the current rate more than covers its forecasted cost for fiscal year 22. Then you may ask, why is there a proposed increase? The answer is that the AMAC report incorporates costs not related to fiscal year 22, but as Omar set out, but rather reconciliation troops for the past 4 years, fiscal years 2017 to 2020, of approximately $68 million. Even though it's spread out over 4 years, it's been doing every year, it becomes a large amount passed on to customers in the current year. We don't believe this reconciliation is not proper. In fact, it is precluded that in the fiscal years where there was no increases and no budgets reviewed, there were still reconciliations put in place. How can you have a reconciliation when there was no increase and no budget to apply it against? To do so is unlawful retroactive rate making and violates the filed rate doctrine. Cost-based rate making has practice here sets rates for future periods, and adjustment for prior periods is improper. For most part, the alleged cost in excess of budget in prior years has nothing to do with operating the system whatsoever. Rather, it is discretionary use of additional funds not provided in the budget in order to defease and retire debt. The cost-based mandated administrative code prohibits the city from using excess revenues in a year to retire debt and pass it back on to customers of the upstate communities through a reconciliation in a future year. When you expend funds not included in the budget, it isn't a reconciliation at all. While there was a prior agreement of the parties as to doing a true-up, it was based on expenditures beyond the city's control, such as a rise in chemical costs. It was never intended to permit the city to evade offsetting future increases and raise rates in the future based on discretionary spending above a budgeted amount. Further, it's improper to burden today's customers with paying for large sums of cash used to defease bonds for construction of facilities with a service life of 50 years or more. MROC's own analysis shows that from 2011 to 2020, the city spent $5.86 billion defeasing bonds, but the savings through 2025 are projected to be only $3.76 billion. One has to go out decades to recognize the savings, yet current customers are bearing all of the expense. This is not proper right.
Mr. Dichter, I just wanted to flag, you got 1 minute left, okay?
Okay, thank you. This we believe not to be proper rate-making methodology. Costs should be borne by those who receive the benefits. We're not saying the city shouldn't use funds to defease bonds. We're just saying that the cost thereof should be spread across all those who enjoy the savings thereby, rather than putting the burden solely on today's customer. Also, a couple other issues raised that I'll go through very quickly in my 1 minute, is that the city has built an infiltration system for the Croton system within the city's boundary. Upstate customers have no access to that reservoir system. There are no interconnections, and since the filtration plant is within the city bounds, they can't use that water anyway. Nonetheless, there are still costs associated with Croton from prior years that are included in the cost of upstate communities. Those costs should be removed. Similarly, there are a number of costs related to the Hillview Reservoir that, again, the upstate communities do use a little of that, but very small percentage, far less than the 10% of the overall cost assigned to upstate communities. And we believe that that should be reduced as well. So I'll just sum up and say, if I may have one more 30 seconds, that the current rate forecast to cover all the costs of operation for fiscal year 22. The proposed rate increase is therefore unjustified and should be rejected. As there is no cost-based rationale for an excess rate above the entitlement rate, the excess rate must be eliminated as well, and all water provided to its upstate fellow residents of the state at the entitlement rate. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Dichter. Is there anyone else who has called in and would like to have the opportunity to give verbal testimony during the hearing? Okay. Hearing none, obviously there is still the opportunity to give written testimony. Want to thank all of our speakers. That will conclude today's hearing, and the board will be returning for its next business meeting on Monday, June 14th at 9 a.m. to consider the proposed rates and its budget for next year. So thanks again to everyone for participating, and we look forward to hearing from you again soon.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Bye, everybody.
Have a good day. Bye-bye.